Okay, hey everybody, this is Kubernetes Workgroup Device Management for June 9th. I will share the agenda. Okay, so the first item on the list came out of a Slack discussion. Francesco put it on here, and I'll let him speak in a minute, but I'll give a quick summary. And I see we have a number of the relevant people, and I invited Joe Betts today last minute, so he hasn't really caught up on it. I just pinged him, and but he's been leading the efforts around Cell and everything, so he hopefully will be able to give us a little bit of guidance. But the idea here is that we have currently have an attribute that we've defined as a standard string attribute called PCI root, and some drivers implement it, but really we have a new feature coming, which is still alpha and will still be alpha in 137, that allows attributes to be lists. And this is actually more appropriately modeled as a list, not as a string. So the question is, how do we change it to a list? Do we allow it to be a list or a string? Do we change the type to a list once that becomes beta or GA? If we do, how do we manage backward compatibility? There's two places it's used. One is in the constraints clause, which has a match attribute and a distinct attribute operation. There we can handle it pretty well, and we've already implemented that as part of the KEP that's implementing lists. But in Cell, it's more difficult because users write those expressions. So Francesco, I hope that's a good summary. If you want to add any color to that, then please go ahead.
Thank you, thank you, John. Yes, it is a good summarization, and my intent here is indeed to bring up the topic to a wider forum. We had an initial conversation last week in this instance, in the APAC-friendly instance of this meeting, and we had a follow-up on Slack. And while good suggestions and good ideas were shared, and for my side, I'm happy with them. I wanted to discuss. I mean, with the full forum, and I'm sure Joe's input will be beneficial. So that's it for me.
I just have
Sorry, go ahead.
I just had a couple quick questions to help me understand. It looks like is there a semantic for the list versus a singular value? Does the list mean like you have to have all of these values, or you have to have one of these values? What does it mean?
So typically, if you think this is, we're trying to model the internal connectivity within the node, and so for like a GPU, it's going to be on a single PCIe root, but a CPU may have adjacency to multiple PCIe roots. They're all equivalent as far as the CPU is concerned, and so the place we tend to use this, I would say the Cell use of it is not the most common use of it. The most common use of it is going to be this match attributes function, where you say this device and this device must share a common root. So that means that we do an intersection between the lists,
okay.
treating single values as a single value list, and that's kind of where we land. That's it allows us to get internal alignment in the node among a bunch of devices, even if some of the drivers publish multiples and some of them publish individuals.
Okay, because my first question was going to be, could you just call Cell multiple times with each value in the list? Like if Cell had been written against a single value, then clearly it would still be type safe to call it individually repeatedly for each of the values in a list. But that's only useful if you can then take the results of those Cell expressions and
we can't. I don't think that works. Yeah. The main problem is that it's an entirely theoretic issue. I don't know whether we have anyone actually writing Cell expressions that will fall into this snag if we change the attribute type. And that makes it very hard for us right now to evaluate different options, because we are basically trying to come up with a solution for something that no one is actually doing. So we don't know what would work for them. The Slack discussion has a few options. I proposed, if we want to be strict, we could say that in the cell environment, we only continue to expose this attribute if it is a list with a single value, like before. That means the cell expression remains valid. Whether the result of the evaluation then is useful, again, depends on the expectation of the author of that cell expression. Because we don't have those cell expressions, we don't know whether that's a good option.
Okay, I get it.
I just threw it out as an option that we could be doing to not break our promise that this attribute is a single value in cell and move on. Because clearly what we want people to do is we have a helper function introduced as part of a list attribute cap. You might remember the discussion that we had with Jordan about this includes method.
Right.
This is exactly the one that we introduced for matching one attribute on one hand and a list on the other, and make it transparent to someone who's writing a cell expression. But they have to use that helper function.
Right. Yeah, I remember that part. There's a couple things that cell can do that may or may not be helpful here. One is that you could compile a cell program and not tell it what type you have for the value yet. You could just say, hey, this is a dynamic type. Compile the expression. The expression will compile. And then you could, after that, you could understand, you could basically extract out of the program information about what the cell author had done. Had they treated the value as a scalar or had they treated it as a list? So you could know that before you make subsequent decisions. So you could choose to do something complicated where you're aware of what the cell author had intended. Oh, I'd written this against a single value. I'd written this against a list. And then you could then do further processing based on that. You could be like, oh, they're treating this as a list, so I will pass in the list. If I was given a scalar, I'll give them a single valued list. You could do something like that. You could do something on the other branch as well. You're like, oh, they expected a scalar, but I have a list. So if it's a list with a single value, I'll switch it back to a scalar for them. If it's a scalar, that's easy. If it's a multi-valued list, and I don't know what to do, I guess I err out. The cell could help you do those kinds of things.
It's a bit tricky because we don't even know whether they are reading that particular attribute.
Yeah.
The attribute name itself could be a computed value, so it almost certainly there will be cases where whatever analysis we do, it will be a runtime error, and then we need to figure out after the fact that, well, this looked up a PCI root attribute, so maybe it was using that like before. And ultimately, after even with my aspiring API review I had on, I would say none of that is actually worth it. In the Slack discussion, I think John at some point, I mentioned it because we don't know with the cell expressions, and it's an unrealistic use case. And then John came back to that later and said, but can't we just bite the bullet and redefine the attribute? And I think we can and we should.
So the only problem with that is that we're still in alpha with the lists. So we wouldn't be
no. That's the part where the comment that I left also for the NUMA attribute applies. If a DRA driver has only a single value, like it currently does, then it publishes a single value. Once a driver wants to use lists, then it publishes a list, and only if it has multiple values. So that we define the attribute as a string if there's one value, and a list if there are multiple, and the feature is enabled.
I see. And so then people writing cell, if they get a driver that has a list and they were never expecting that because they didn't read the docs, they'll get an error and they'll just have to fix it. Right?
And if they are in a cluster where the list attributes feature is turned off, it's perfectly fine to write the traditional cell expressions because there shouldn't be any driver with list attributes published. So we basically do what we have done before, and only once we add list attributes, we tell driver authors, not driver authors, consumers, beware, this attribute now might be a list, and you should be using the includes function that came with that feature. So we don't depend on that feature. We just depend on it for those use cases where we defined the list attributes for drivers that actually have more than one value.
I mean, essentially, we're saying we provided the user with some utilities to be able to process this, but we're not going to automatically try to manage backward compatibility here because we think it's a rare use case. And those users that are doing it probably really know what they're doing, and they can handle, oh, I'm upgrading the driver and now it's going to publish a list, and so I should change my cell expressions. Like basically, it's action required. It's basically an action required.
It is actually required to some extent. Tim Bannister suggested that we do a comms on it. I think we can get away with something in the release notes that say scalar a release node action required in the list attributes changelog for 137 that says if you are deploying a driver which uses this feature, consumers must be aware and might have to do something only if they use this particular use case that we don't think they'll ever do, but we could put something into a breaking change section in the changelog, and I think that should
personally I'm fine with that. Like I agree that this is a very rare thing and we shouldn't twist ourselves in knots about trying to.
And it's not any worse than any other type of change that I'm sorry, I don't know the terminology, but the publisher of these attributes, like if you change the semantics around what you're publishing, or if you change the way it's represented, there's a bunch of breaking changes you can make. Switching from a value to a list is just another breaking change that you can make. So if you want to be a really stable publisher of these attributes, you just have to be aware of that and not make those changes without getting a pathway for your consumers to be able to cope with it.
Yeah, and if somebody's like reading this particular attribute, like they're very carefully crafting some things, like they know something about a lot of details about their nodes, like it's one thing to do match attribute where you're like, I don't care what the values are, just that they're the same across these drivers, and but to say I'm going to use cell to like do a regular expression or something against a specific root value, that sounds a little bit like I'm very carefully crafting these manifests, and I'm gonna know when I'm upgrading the driver and it's changing some behavior. That's that's my assumption. It's an assumption, but
if you go that path, it might actually be easier for the average developer to understand if you don't do any type of coalescing. If you're just like, if it's a value, I return it as a value. If it's a list, I return it as a list. And
I think
everybody understands that.
Yeah. We just document it and let people deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So what do others think? It's been Joe and Patrick and I speaking mostly. Any there were other people who are involved in the conversation. You're okay with that, Francesco? Okay.
I am. It's basically, looks to me the simplest solution, and for driver which doesn't have the backward compatibility constraint, like they're just publishing the list from the beginning, it's actually the simplest. So from my perspective, I am fine.
Okay. Awesome. That's great. That's I love decisions that are easy and easy to implement. Thank you, Joe, for your help.
Yeah, looks great, guys.
All right, next item then, Francesco, it's you as well.
Yeah, that one is going to be quick. So previously we talked about individual mode versus grouped mode in the context of the DRSCPU driver, and that drove a conversation about possibly splitting because the two operational modes are quite different. So very recently, there is this proposal, which I linked here, about an alternative take with which retains the benefits of individual mode for integration purposes, but it is really, really nicely fitting in the grouped mode. So people which are interested in the individual mode, some of them, like Marlo, already commented, and I thank you them for that. So take a look. We are inclined to merge in the DRSCPU driver and gather some feedback. And if this works as we intend it, then we will probably change our decision to split because it won't make any sense. And if things go really well, like we hope, actually we like to retire the individual mode and retain this operational mode. So people which are looking or interested or consuming the individual mode for the RCP driver, please have a look and comment. It's going to be almost certainly merged in the next release, and then we'll see how it goes. Thank you, everyone.
Praveen had a POC that I was playing with and made sure that it would work. So if you want to try that, if you are using individual, he's probably the one to reach to.
Thank you for that. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, last one, Sebastian.
Just to bring like the cap I'm working on, I think I fixed all like the comments there. I wanted to know if there is any other criticals one and things like that. I already start coding it, so if something change, I will also change the coding, and I hope like next week to already open the PR for on Kubernetes itself for this one.
Awesome. Yeah, I did a quick sweep through it, I think, when you first put it out, and it looked good to me. So I'll just say, Geeta, it looks like you're here. We need a PRR file on your cap. Otherwise, and that has to happen today.
Okay.
In order to meet the PRR freeze. You filled out the questionnaire, but there's like a file you have to put in, right, for the approval to machinery.
Good. I'll post it today. Yeah, I was hoping I'll make more progress on it before this meeting, but I couldn't. But yeah, I'll add the PRR and I'll drop a link to the issue here in chat for everyone. Anyone has additional feedback, I appreciate it. I'll post the PRR, John.
Awesome, thank you. So I think that's literally the only one that's at risk for PRR freeze on our whole list. And Dominic opted in on all those from the SIG scheduling ones, and Peter opted in on all of them from the SIG node that are managed by SIG node. So I think we're in good shape for the PRR deadline today, which just to remind folks is not that you get it PRR reviewed or approved, it's that you have an open PR that meets, it has that PRR approval file and lists and answers all the questions that are appropriate for your stage. So I think our caps are all in good shape for that, and a lot of them are almost ready to merge, I think, for enhancements free. So I'm hoping that we'll actually be, maybe by the end of this week, we'll have most of them in, and kind of have a little bit of not too insane of a Monday next week and Tuesday. So, okay, awesome. That's our whole agenda. Any other things or topics people want to discuss before we go?
I can comment briefly on Geeta's cap. For those who are not aware, it's a performance improvement. I commented on the cap. The cap itself doesn't really describe the particular situation where the scheduler isn't as fast as it could be. So this is something that needs to be updated or should be updated in the cap itself. And perhaps more importantly, I also experimented a little bit with that problem myself locally, and I could reproduce that performance suffers from event handling with scheduler. That's what the cap is about. And Geeta's proposal works. I wasn't just particularly comfortable with the way how she used the owner reference, but there is an alternative. I left comments in the cap about using an indexed informer to figure out which pods need to be considered. And I implemented that today. It works. I think we can go ahead with the cap, and with all these changes, I'd even be comfortable making that a beta and on by default thing, as long as someone from SIG scheduling is fine with reviewing the SIG scheduling parts. For the plugin with the indexed informer, I'm okay going ahead with this.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know that. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Geeta.
No, I was going to say thank you for that update. On my side is I want to test that out. I'll be testing with Quark nodes and post that data back into the into the cap.
Yeah, but that's part of my comments. For a cap and for the feature implementation, we need a way to verify the performance in Kubernetes, and we currently are not using Qwak for that. So we need a way to track performance in those problematic cases that you highlighted, and we can do that. We can do that with scheduler perf.
Mhm.
That just needs to go into the cap in your test plan, that you say,
Okay.
we'll
Okay.
update the performance, expected performance for the following scheduler perf test cases, because they will be better with those changes, and that should be sufficient. You can, on your side, verify with Qwak, but that's basically auxiliary information. It doesn't help us in Kubernetes that much.
Sounds good. Thanks, Patrick.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna comment. I know that Kenzai already, I think from the discussion I saw that you had with him and other scheduling folks, they're also, I think, optimistic that we can do it as a default on beta that has a feature gate to turn it off. So, which would be nice. That's like a full release ahead, which is nice. So, okay, thank you, everybody. Anything else? All right. Well, have a great day, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.